so thanks everyone for coming on today. We're very lucky to have Jo Davies up from Reigate in Surrey to talk to us about how she's developed her own sports psychology consultancy practice. Jo started her training similar time to myself and Ross, about 4 or 5 years, 5 years ago. Yeah. And so we've kind of gone through the journey together and have met up and had some interesting chats at conferences throughout that time. But Jo's got a lot of great experience to share today. I think she said that it can be quite an informal session, so if you want to ask her anything throughout, then you'll have to
definitely.
keep it like that. So over to Jo.
Cool, thank you. Thank you for having me along today. I guess the kind of basis of this session was that I wanted to talk about growing a consultancy as a private practice and kind of challenges and reflections of that journey. So I don't really know how long this is going to take because I normally run workshops, and I was saying to Charlotte yesterday, giving a talk, I don't really know how long my slides are going to take. So I'll kind of see how it goes, and I will leave room for discussion time at the end. I'm not going to kind of talk for an hour and a half. But equally, like Charlotte said, if people want to ask questions as we go, just kind of ask me and kind of shout in, because I'm keen for it to kind of be a discussion and to kind of learn from you guys as well, hopefully, as well as me, hopefully put some useful things across. I'll probably talk kind of about my background, and Charlotte said a bit already about who I am, so I'll just kind of get started. So that's meant to depict me coming out of my masters. Probably a bit smarter than I look for my masters, though, to be fair. Briefly about my background up to that point, I'd done an undergrad in psychology, and then had a few years out because I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. So I moved to London, did some kind of unrelated stuff, and then decided I couldn't bear my office job any longer and I wanted to do something a bit more fulfilling. And enrolled onto my masters, would have been 2012-13. And then off the back of that, did my BPS QSET qualification in sport and exercise psychology. So that was kind of me looking at the world of work and kind of going a bit, oh god. So we had this conversation earlier around there's quite a big gap, as I see it, between the masters and actually getting into professional work, in the sense that you might do some role play in your masters and you kind of get a sense of what it's going to be like with clients, but you kind of come out of your masters course and suddenly you're like, right, I've got a client sat in front of me and I've kind of got to do this, and I'm a trainee, yet I've got to be professional and act like I know what I'm doing, even if inside I'm quite nervous and worried about this. So it's quite a kind of contradiction of experience, but also kind of going with it and putting on this kind of professional hat. So yeah, I guess that's kind of my journey and the starting point of where I was back in 2013. I really like that. I stole that from another workshop I went to. And keep calm, feel the fear, and do it anyway. So you're in this place where you've come out for your masters, you're ready to start stage 2. You're kind of thinking about where do I grow my client base? What am I going to do? I've got 3 kind of key bullet points here. The first one was about valuing your knowledge, and I remember having this conversation with my supervisor about, I don't feel like I know enough. I've done the masters, but there's so much more I want to learn. And him saying to me, but you already know so much more than the average layperson, right? Compared to the average individual and their knowledge of sports psychology, you are an expert. And so I think it's valuing the knowledge and understanding, and even those little bits of role play in class that you've already done, and being confident with that. Know what you're working towards. I think the point of that was, when you start your stage 2 and it's this independent pathway, which is great because it's so flexible, and you have a choice about what CPD I do and what kind of philosophies do I look into, and what kind of client base do I want to grow. But it's almost this overwhelming sense of there's so many options open to me. And so I guess something I reflect on is that I knew when I started my stage 2 I wanted to have a kind of a private practice by the end of my qualification. so kind of self-sufficient business. So at the beginning I had a part-time job alongside stage 2 to kind of pay the bills. But I knew that's what I wanted by the end, so like my CPD and kind of training was geared towards setting up private practice. And say yes. We talked about this as well, like say yes to everything, even if the thought of it terrifies you, and then figure out how you're going to do it. Within reason. So I don't know if anyone's seen that analogy of the strength and the stretch and the stress zones before. You like think of 3 circles, one inside the other, and if the middle's kind of your comfort zone, your strength zone, what you're good at already. If the stretch zone kind of takes you outside of that, it's something that challenges you, but you know that if you prepare for it well, you can do that competently, albeit probably with mistakes, challenges along the way. And then you've got your stress zone on the outside of that circle, so kind of doing that task now might be a bit too overwhelming. Give you an example, I used to be absolutely terrified of public speaking. When I was at high school, I was generally quite a good student, but I would miss class. If we had to give a talk, I would just like play truant and go into town. And even during my masters, I would say I would stand in front of a group of about this size and like quite literally shake. And I think it's just repetition. So like for me going on to stage 2, if I'd been approached by a club or an organisation, come and give a talk to 300 people, that would take me into a stress zone. Like that probably wouldn't have been a good thing for me to start off with. But running workshop with 25 people, for example, that would have been a nice little stretch for me to go, okay, that kind of seems manageable within maybe a kind of low-key club environment. So stretch yourself gradually. I suppose the other thing with that is knowing, I'm thinking of another example quite early on in my training years where I'd driven up to, I think it was Milton Keynes area to do some stuff with the riding club, and I ran a 90-minute workshop and then I did 5 client sessions back to back and then drove home. And I think even now I would find that a long day, but at the time as an early trainee, I was not ready like that. Took me into a stress zone, kind of in a different way. I suppose it wasn't so much a fear stress zone, but more of I've kind of overworked myself here. Like I wasn't mentally resourced to manage that situation. So say yes, feel the fear and do it anyway, but kind of know whether it's a stretch or a stress and how to stretch yourself gradually. I think early on I came to realise quite quickly that I wasn't just training for one role. I was training for many roles without really having realised. So after the sort of off the back of my masters, I immediately registered as self-employed, created a website, started to build a client base. And I suppose what I came to realise was actually I'm doing all of these different jobs. If I was working for an organisation, they would employ maybe 6 or more different people to do these different roles, but because I'm self-employed, I'm trying to do all of them. And I'm trying to do all of them and I'm not really sure what I'm doing. so to kind of give you some ideas, you know, as like leading my strategy, you know, what are the industry trends, what direction do I want to take my business in? How do I plan and execute that? Marketing, you know, and I still say I'm not an expert at marketing. I can give you some ideas around growing my client base, but you know, you've got to think about branding. As a self-employed person, you are your own brand. So how do you manage that? What kind of things do you want on your website? How do you go about social media? PA. I remember when I first set up my business bank account and I used to get really, really excited when I got an email. It was like that, you know, when your inbox dings and I was like, I've got a business email, like potential client. And now when I open my inbox, it's a bit like that. I've got lots of emails to go through. And I keep trying to persuade my dad, who is now retired, to do some secretarial work for me, but he's denied that offer so far. But yeah, you know, the general admin, right? Emails, time management, organising travel, etc. It takes time. Budget holder and accountant. this is something that I was relatively clueless about when I first started out, in terms of registering with the HMRC, filing a tax return, doing my invoicing, looking at cash flow. Obviously, as self-employment, you have to think about kind of how much am I putting into a pension pot. And holidays is also a consideration, because obviously when you're self-employed, you're not only taking a holiday, look, I'm my own boss, so I can give myself holidays if I want to, but I'm not being paid during that time. I don't have the luxury of holiday pay from an employer. So it's just a consideration around how does my cash flow interlink with my workload. I would say that it took me a while to become business savvy, in the sense that, you know, my first year, I kind of got to the end of the tax year and was like, oh, I better sort of do some kind of filing and look at what's come in and what's gone out, and I hadn't really kept much of an eye on it. Now, my friend is an accountant, and she helped me massively with that in terms of setting up a spreadsheet of what have people paid you and have they actually paid you. Like, I was awful. I'd look at my bank account and 6 months later be like, oh, that person never actually paid me for that session. Right, and what do? You go back to them 6 months later, and so yeah, keeping on top of budgeting, which is boring but necessary. And then kind of litigation stuff. So GDPR and ICO is basically about a kind of data protection. So how do you keep clients' data? What do you do with it? How do you store it? How transparent are you? Making sure the clients know what you're doing with their data. Setting up insurance for yourself, which thankfully I've never had to use, but you know, in the case that someone does decide you didn't do a good job or you overstepped a boundary. And also having a professional will, which is something I only found out about through our peer supervision session. Actually, is something I should have in place. And then finally being a sports psych, which kind of, I put the easy bit, compared to all of that, you suddenly go, okay, I can actually get on and do my job and work with people, and that's kind of the fun bit and the enjoyable bit, but there's all this stuff that goes with it, and I certainly hadn't appreciated that when I finished my masters and went, yeah, I know I want to be self-employed, but actually there's all this kind of extra stuff that comes with it. Okay, so growing a client base. I guess my client base seemed to grow quite organically, which is good in hindsight. I think at the beginning I was kind of so craving clients and I want to do more, but actually my client base probably grew at a rate that I as a trainee was ready for, so that I wasn't overloading myself mentally, physically. The rule of 7, I don't know if you would have heard of that, it's kind of a marketing term. So what they say is, in theory, a potential client needs to hear your message or hear your name 7 times to actually get in touch and book your services. Give or take, that's obviously not set in stone, but that's apparently what kind of marketers look at. So I think for me what was really useful was knowing my initial target market, because obviously there's such a huge pool of sport exercise potential clients out there. So I really thought about what is my target market, where am I most comfortable and confident to start working. And my background from when I was little was equestrian sport. So it was a kind of sport where I had quite a lot of contacts already, quite a lot of experience, could speak the language. I knew if I kind of ran workshops in that environment or met one-to-one clients, I could speak their language, and I kind of got the sport. So that was where I initially targeted as kind of somewhere to grow my client base, alongside other sports, but that's where I really targeted. So to give you some ideas around what I did to grow my client base in that area. Across the first couple of years of my training, I ran workshops for the kind of governing bodies within equestrian, so British eventing, British show jumping, British dressage. I just contacted them. I just kind of looked up their websites and looked who the kind of regional coordinator in my area was and emailed them and kind of come and run a workshop, and they said yes. So, it's one of those things where it was great for me because these organisations are advertising my workshops for me and they're doing the admin, and yes, they take a cut, but not only have I got a kind of guaranteed income from that workshop, but also they're a very credible organisation to be seen to be working with. My website, like I say, is set up pretty early. I'm lucky that my brother does web design, so I basically wrote all the content and sent it over to him and said, can you sort this out for me? Which he did after a couple of months. So it was kind of that thing where, because I was friends and family, I got bumped to the bottom of the pile, but he did it eventually. So I've got an equestrian specific tab on my webpage which kind of talks a bit about my experience. I also had some professional photos taken for the website, which I guess it's just a kind of quality assurance thing, right? Like, people look at it and you've got these nice pictures on your website and it just looks that bit more professional, and it wasn't that expensive to do. A little bit cringy looking back through them, but I wrote several articles and blogs for different equestrian websites, blog sites, so like Horse and Rider magazine. I wrote a kind of three magazine kind of wide feature for them. And that was really good actually, because I did a case study for each kind of topic that we looked at, and they then made it into mini videos. So they came and kind of filmed me chatting with a rider and talking about our work, and that went on their website, so that was quite a nice kind of addition. And it was Horse and Rider also have an Ask an Expert section, so I kind of did that for them, pretended to be an expert for a bit. So that was one of the videos they did. I guess this wasn't equestrian specific, but made up some gift vouchers just as a kind of, I suppose, marketing idea, like, why your friend or partner want for Christmas, birthday, sports psychology vouchers. I managed to get that into Horse and Hound at Christmas, which I'm not sure directly got. I'm trying to think. I might have got one looking through that, but one's better than none, right? And it didn't cost me anything. It was just an email. Can this go in your Christmas feature? And somehow that managed to get in. This was quite early on when I was a trainee. I think maybe 6 months to a year in. I ran I suppose I did a kind of sponsorship project. So just through social media, I put out that I wanted to sponsor a rider. And I guess you've got to think about your target audience for this. Riders love sponsorship, and I guess it's the same in many sports, but like amateur riders in particular, like all over, what kind of sponsorship can I get? So I put that out there on social media, and I think I had about 150 applicants, which I was quite surprised by, because at the time I wouldn't have had that many Twitter followers or kind of Facebook followers in my group. But automatically that's suddenly 150 more people that know about me and my business. And I did get a few people who kind of didn't get the sponsorship deal, who then came for one-to-one sessions afterwards. So I ended up sponsoring 2 riders, because I literally had this file, there were so many good applicants, and I ended up going with 1 professional and 1 amateur in the end. And they've kind of done things to promote me. Now that wasn't part of the deal. I didn't say you have to promote me in these ways as part of the sponsorship deal, but naturally that's just come about. So essentially I give them sports psychology support free of charge, and also things like a kind of jacket with my logo on, sponsored by Davies Psychology. And this is the professional event rider who kind of talked about working with me, and I think that was Horse and Hound again, and that was in doing an interview with someone talking about managing nerves for another equestrian website. So it kind of naturally it's come about that they've promoted me in their own way. I also sponsor the South East Eventers League, which is basically eventers in the South East, amateurs, professionals. Costs me a couple of £100 a year, but in every newsletter they send out, which is, I think there's kind of an e-letter, maybe bi-monthly across the year. And my logo will always be in there. They might do the odd feature on kind of my workshops coming up. So again, that's kind of an easy win within a target market. I set up, I think I've done 2 independent courses for equestrians. So Holistic Rider was one that I set up with a friend who's a physiotherapist, which is also a Pilates instructor. And we kind of set up this course where she did 45 minutes of Pilates and I did 45 minutes of sports psychology. Just a kind of different idea, I guess. And in terms of kind of paper marketing, I had some flyers made up, put them up in kind of salaries, tack shops, went to a couple of events, had a band made up and kind of chatted to people as they walked past or waiting around for prize giving. So I think there's at least 7 there, but those are just some ways within the equestrian industry in particular I felt I wanted to grow, at least initially, of how I kind of got my name and my message and my business and branding out into that market. Other tips on creating a client base. These are kind of personal reflections. I'm not saying these are kind of true across the board. I'm not a marketing expert. I don't really know how my website comes up on Google. It just does. My brother would be able to tell you. Although I don't do optimization actually. My understanding is the more links you have to and from your website, so if other websites link to you and you link to other websites, you get higher up Google rankings. So I've tried to do that as much as I can. That is the extent of my knowledge about optimization and getting your website up there. I think generally there's not that many sports psychology websites, so that helps as well. So I guess this is an obvious one, but I would say this is the key way that I've grown my client base, build relationships and build some more. I have never got any of my contract work by applying for a job and getting an interview. I don't know whether that sounds encouraging or a little bit like, oh. and I don't think that is luck. I think that's genuinely being proactive about building relationships and going and buying people coffee or messaging people on social media about something they've done that looks interesting, or putting yourself out there at conferences, go and chat to people, even if you're like, oh god, that's so and so and they're a bit intimidating. Talk to as many people as you can. And I genuinely believe what goes around comes around. Like, I've been given work and I pass work on to other people. And I just think the more people you know in this industry, the better. And sports psychology is a small world, and people are generally friendly, and people kind of do seem to help each other out. So I think that is a massive one for me. I felt that contacts and relationships trump cold calling, which is kind of a follow-on, I guess. I have sent out loads of emails before and done that thing where you kind of look up lots of clubs, organisations within the area, kind of email them all, being like, hey, this is what I do. Do you want to collaborate? Rarely have I got anything back. I'm not saying that's not feasible or a good idea. Because you might get something from it, but I do think if you have a way in, if you can say, look, I know this person who knows you, or even if you pick up the phone rather than emailing, there's something about a relationship or knowing a mutual contact which really helps. I would say I've made quite a lot of links in my local area. So like I said, I live in a town called Reigate in Surrey. It's things like we have a Reigate 10k and half marathon, so it's kind of going on to those things. I understand at that event and I wrote a blog for them, and just through those things you kind of get a sense of who else is in the area. So at that time, I spoke to a lady who was a nutritionist and had this health food shop, and she kind of runs workshops with different sports science support. I've kind of sourced like a clinical psychologist who lives in my area, who we kind of now catch up together now and again, and she's someone I can refer cases on to. So kind of knowing who's in your area, I think it's important, like physiotherapists, any other kind of sports science support in your area you can link up with. Be able to sell yourself in your own way. So I think sometimes by selling yourself, it sounds like a hard sell, and that's just not me. Like that picture of me, or not of me, but that kind of scared face looking at the big wide world. I say naturally I'm an introvert. Naturally I wouldn't go out and kind of want to, like, this is me and this is what I do and this is what I can do for you and look at the results that I've got. So I think you've got to do it in your own way, and again, for me, selling myself is just about building relationships and kind of chatting with people and being equally as interested in what they do as kind of sharing what I do. Assess trends. So something that I've noticed is a growing market is people wanting Skype or FaceTime sessions. I think that's just a sign of people being busy. Maybe it's a sign that there's not enough sports psychologists in the area as well, can sometimes be the case. But it's certainly, I would say probably about 20% of my one-to-one private work is done on Skype or FaceTime now. Having a web and social media presence. I think it's important to think about what you want to put on your website and the balance between professional and personal. So some feedback I've had on mine is that people kind of feel like they get a sense of who I am. And I think that's important because actually, like I said earlier, you are your own product as a psychologist. Like, you're kind of selling yourself. People contact you because they want to work with you. So getting that balance, and also on social media, what's that balance between personal and professional, and what kind of things do I project out there? And then maintaining relationships. So it's all very well going out and getting this business, and then you've got to maintain it. And again, I say I pride myself on trying to keep relationships, kind of checking in with people. Some of my clients I might see really regularly, and some of them, I would see maybe every couple of months, and that's normal. But just checking in with them every now and again, ping them an email or a text, how's it going, what have you been up to? So yeah, so those would just be some key reflections, really, not kind of rules, but just things that I've kind of found useful. Like I said, when I first started out, I knew that I wanted to run a private practice. I would say it's only been in the last year or so maybe that I've been truly, really confident that I've got enough private clients and inquiries coming my way that I can rely on that business. So it probably took me 3.5, 4 years to get to a point where I was like, I've got a consistent flow of inquiries. So I would maybe get a couple of inquiries a week for individual sessions. That said, I think it's really important to think about the reliability of your work. So there's always going to be a kind of peak and trough in terms of individual clients coming your way. So the contract work that I do at the moment is in army shooting and just about to start with army boxing. So they are the two kind of, I should probably explain that pie chart, shouldn't I? So that is my, roughly, a split of where my income comes from. So the 14% on that side would be the boxing and the shooting. So I know that bit of money coming in each month is going to pay my mortgage, like that pays my bills. And it's kind of weighing up the reliability of work, which might be slightly less well paid, with the private practice, which is better paid, but slightly less reliable. And I think having both is my ideal in terms of balancing that. I know this much is coming in, but also I really love the private work and it is a bit more lucrative. So I'd say, roughly nearly 50% of my income comes from my private one-to-one work. That I would say currently comes probably half and half split between word of mouth and my website. To the point where I now get recommended by people I don't know. So people email me and say, so-and-so has told me to get in touch. I have no idea who that person is, but they must have seen my name somewhere, right? So I guess that's that snowball effect and kind of growing organically. What else do I do? Okay, so the segment at the bottom, the 9%, that's private practice workshops, which I might be a bit more proactive about. The private clients now kind of steadily flow in. The workshops I might approach organisations and clubs still and say, you know, can I come and run a workshop for you? What else have I got there? The little ones at the top, the kind of smaller segments in the northwest would be athletics, that's maybe 10 days a year. Something called the Surrey High Performance Institute, which is kind of based in Guildford, kind of an associate of theirs. A bit of lecturing, and other would be just kind of writing articles, blogs that I get paid for, things like that. So I think it's important to think about what are the different revenue streams coming in and how reliable are they. And again, we had this conversation last night in terms of, actually I think, you know, I'm pretty well resourced in terms of having a few different income streams, whereas you know, I had such difficulty getting a mortgage because I was self-employed. Yeah, actually, you know, someone else who is employed could be made redundant tomorrow, but a company could go under tomorrow, whereas I've got these different streams. So it's frustrating, but it is what it is. I won't have a rant about that. Okay. So I suppose that's the practical stuff around growing a client base, and kind of thinking about where do the revenue streams come from. The next part of what I want to talk about is something that I am really passionate about self-care of the practitioner. This is quite nice, I think. So how does the opera singer take care of the voice, the photographer the eyes, the ballerina the feet, the practitioner in a helping, caring, relationship, intense profession, the self? So I think generally as people drawn to psychology, we're generally naturally kind of caring, empathetic individuals, and like we want to help other people. You know, that's generally kind of what we hear about. You know, why do you love this work? Well, I love kind of seeing other people grow and develop, and I love being part of that. But how well do we help ourselves? You know, does our empathy kind of become this double-edged sword? So that's quite a nice saying as well. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You must fill your cup first. But it's difficult, right? And this is a quote from Carl Rogers that I got from a book. He was age 75 at the time. So you probably all know, like, Rogers was humanistic, counselling psychologist, and he talked about, I've always been better at caring for, I think that's lost behind the picture. That doesn't make sense, does it? I've always been better at caring for and looking after others than I've been at caring for myself. But in these later years, I've made progress. So, you know, I guess it's just that normalisation. We all find it difficult. We can care for others, but how well do we actually introspectively then look at ourselves and go, am I looking after myself? I don't know how to pronounce his name. Scovolt? Let's go with that. He talked about these 4 key areas, I guess, to reflect on in terms of as a practitioner. Am I conscious of my professional resiliency and my self-care? So he talked about vitality in a sense of professional and personal, and also stress in a sense of professional and personal. And I'll talk you through those 4 areas in a bit more detail in a moment and give you some reflections of mine about them. The self-care reflections that I've got, I would say, are really infused with an ACT approach, which I've come across relatively recently, comes under the umbrella of CBT, but there's kind of some key differences in terms of how ACT might look at certain things differently from I suppose, a hard CBT approach. Would everyone be familiar with ACT? I was going to try and talk a bit more about it later, but would you have kind of heard of acceptance and commitment therapy? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I won't talk about it too much now because I'm going to talk about it a bit later, but I suppose I put that bullet point there, accepting and managing difficult thoughts and feelings in pursuit of value-driven actions. So as a practitioner, I know what my values are in terms of professionally and personally. How do I deal with the difficult stuff that comes up in pursuit of those values, right? So if my value is to help my client, but this client work is really, really challenging, but maybe because of the circumstances or there's something particular about this client case, there's going to be some difficult thoughts and feelings that come up for me, but I manage those, I accept those, that they're going to come up because I'm pursuing that value of helping that person. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah. I'll go into that a little bit more later. So the first element that Scott talked about was this professional vitality. When we go through these, maybe just kind of reflect for yourself what areas of those do I feel as strengths at the moment and which do I feel are development areas for me. So it talks about finding meaning in your work, having an interest and energy and making positive attachments at work. Does your employer or do you value practitioner welfare and self-care? Do you feel supported by others in your professional environment? Do you have reasonable rather than excessive work demands? And are you closer to high control than no control of your work? And this is also where I have confession. There's some slightly suspect pictures in this presentation, and where I confess that I wrote these slides quite late into Saturday night, and at the time I thought some of these pictures were funny, so bear with me on those. Yeah, so here's some reflections of mine on kind of what I found challenging, or maybe still do find challenging about professional vitality. That is a real life picture of me. Charlotte's been in that car today. You can probably testify that is an accurate picture. Okay, so this first point, I guess, is a crossover between professional and personal vitality, but your values as an individual. So what's actually really important in ACT, so acceptance and commitment therapy, it's a really key part of the model about thinking about what's truly important, like what are your kind of deepest desires in terms of how you want to be as a human, in terms of how you want to treat others, in terms of how you want to live your life. And so I think why this is important is because, particularly as a trainee and being self-employed, you're juggling all these different plates, right? Like you're spinning lots of different projects, you've got your stage 2 work, you're trying to grow a client base, you're maybe doing research, you're maybe doing lecturing, you've got all these different things you're trying to fit in. And sometimes that can override what actually is important, which might be about health or relationships. Like, are you neglecting other really key parts of your life because work is taking over? And I've definitely been guilty of that at times. I know the end of my stage 2, which would have been last spring, when I was about to submit, I was doing all-nighters to try and fit everything in, which was ridiculous. When I reflect on it, I go, was it that important that that reflection had to be so good? When the assessor might not have even read it, right? It's, this 300-page document. Do they actually read them all? I don't know. But yeah, thinking about, okay, what is truly important to me in life, and am I getting that balance right? Knowing what to take on. So I gave that example earlier as like a trainee taking on that kind of all those sessions in the day and workshop, and yes, I got a nice bit of money for it, but I was also absolutely shattered afterwards. I can't remember if I had work the day after or not, but I can guarantee that I wouldn't have done a good day of work after that really long day. And kind of knowing how to schedule sessions. So I would say the maximum number of sessions I would do in a day now is 5 one-to-one hour clients. I've done 6, and my reflection was that on a 6th client I wasn't giving them a good enough deal, like they weren't getting their value for money in terms of me being fully present and engaged in the session. I'm not saying I was clock watching, but yeah.
How long is the session?
An hour, yeah. And I think also, knowing how long you need between a session, like not setting them up back to back, because inevitably a client might be late, or you might need to run a little bit over depending on circumstances, or it might be a really difficult client case, and you actually yourself need that time to reflect and kind of go, that was emotional for me as well, and I need that time just to reflect or ground myself to be back in headspace for the next client that I see. Taking enough rest. I still am guilty of this. I used to be really guilty of saying yes to everything. So a client emails me, can we speak at 8 PM tomorrow? Yeah, sure. And that's fine as a one-off, but if things like that keep happening, you've got different clients that you're bending over backwards for, suddenly you're tired, you're putting yourself at risk from burnout. So I've got better at looking at my diary, blocking out space, and knowing I am taking that as holiday, and I'm not going to look at my phone or check my emails during that time. I am also the queen of cat naps. We were talking about this earlier. I do have a skill, and I think I'm a 10th narcoleptic or something, where I can just fall asleep like that. So I don't function well when I'm tired, but I know that if I've got, say, an hour's space between 2 clients and I'm really tired, I can very easily take a 20-minute nap and sleep and get up and feel better for it. So I think it's just kind of knowing you and your body and your energy levels and when you peak and trough and being appropriate with that. I used to drive a lot, so I used to have a flat in southwest London. And because I really wanted to work, I remember kind of driving 90 minutes to a client's house, early on in my training, because I wanted the client. Which seems ridiculous now, and I'm not quite sure. I know why I did it. I was being proactive. I was growing a client base, and I know this isn't a kind of practical. You can't just magic up a home office, but that has been life-changing for me in terms of spending a bit less time in my car. And doing less commuting, but I also think there's a challenge there in terms of boundaries and sort of having clients come into your space. So I'm always really conscious that that's my workspace and that's my rest space, to the point where I'll have tea and coffee facilities in my office, so I'm not kind of taking a client up, going back into my rest space in the kitchen, making tea, coffee, taking it up back in workspace and kind of flitting between the two. So I think and that is my office. I'm quite proud because I moved house recently and I've kind of been able to set up my office exactly how I want it. Having an office but being really clear about your boundaries, where do I work in the house? I try really hard not to work in my lounge, but to work in my office, leave the room, switch off the light, close the door, downstairs, this is my rest time now, and not check my email on my phone, so sort of having quite clear boundaries for myself. Does anyone have any kind of reflections on that at all? In terms of professional vitality, can anyone think of any ways that they've kind of managed?
Well, just talking about having those separate spaces, I think I'm really bad for that actually. I'll just be on the sofa or working on the laptop, then I'll put it away and switch the TV on afterwards. But I've never maybe set those boundaries for myself really. Then probably 10 minutes later I'll be checking the emails on the phone. I think it's actually finding that, and I'll probably actually be more efficient if I actually segregating my time. Alright, this is work time, this is relaxation time, rather than the two kind of just blurring into one big mess, really. But it's discipline, isn't it? And I'm not saying I'm a saint at that. I will still kind of check my emails and be like, oh, I just quickly message that person back. But actually it could wait till tomorrow.
Have you so there's something we were talking about in our last week's supervision as well, was having a work phone. So I don't have one at the moment, so my clients will message me on my personal phone, so it is all
Yeah.
And actually, is that something that people are working, that you have a work number that your clients festival and you only turn that on at certain times? Or?
Do you know, I don't, but I actually think that's a really good idea. And this is where I said I wanted to learn from you guys as well. I haven't really considered that, but I think I should, because you're right. So, a message flashes up and you want to look at it. So you look at it and then it's a kind of, oh, I've got to do that, or that person needs me here, and then your head's off on work, and actually it's...
It definitely helps with holidays, so I do that.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So I'm a psychiatrist working in sports, and I do that. So I have 2 phones, work phone, personal phone. We do get a bit meshed together.
Yeah.
We're not strict enough at dividing the 2. It helps because you don't take your work on holiday.
Yeah.
It just means you need to check the multiple devices.
Yeah.
To work with checking and charging.
No, yeah, it's something that came up that I think that I haven't actioned yet.
Yeah, definitely food for thought there. Yeah, I like that idea. Okay, so personal vitality. Again, when we go through these, just kind of think about what do I do really well at, what could I maybe improve. I'm just looking at the thing for self-care. Right, sorry. Right, so humour, laughter and fun. There we go, had that all today, hopefully. Positive or close friendships and intimacy. Being physically active, having a source of energy, so a hobby, activity. Balanced finances, kind of not having financial stress. I thought this was quite interesting, like the way he put it, kind of having concrete activities where results are clear cut to balance the ambiguity within the caring profession. So we talked about like gardening or crafts or like fantasy football or like something that's kind of like doing and quite concrete and you kind of see the outcome out of it. Eating and sleep habits that are good for the body, and a strong code of values and ethics that give direction and so my reflections on that is my whole community. He's definitely part of my personal vitality, I would say. Knowing my support and friendship network. Someone gave me this analogy once, which I think is really nice, this idea of radiators and hoovers. So a radiator would be someone that after you've chatted with them, you kind of feel buoyant, like they've given you some really constructive advice, or they've just listened or been supportive in some way, and then you've kind of got energy from that conversation. And then a hoover would be the opposite, so it's someone that completely sucks it out of you. So you kind of finish that conversation and you feel really drained, or you've kind of taken on board all their stuff because it's been moan, or they've been very critical without being constructive. And it's quite interesting because I think you can still have friends who are hoovers. Like I've definitely got some friends who are, and I still count them as friends, but I do know they are a bit of a hoover. So it's just, I suppose, knowing when you see those people, and how good maybe some people are for you. Yeah.
Do you think that's the case in maybe different situations? There may be a radiator in some situations, but a hoover in others?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, maybe it depends on context as well. Yeah, you're right. So like, yeah, maybe in a, I'm thinking of like junior clients, maybe in a sporting context, my parent is like this, but in another environment, school, they're like this. Yeah, definitely. Prioritising self. So, because I am self-employed, I set my own hours, I do work some evenings and some weekends. I'm getting much better at blocking out weekends and blocking out some evenings where I go, actually no, that is my time for yoga or time for fitness, or I want to go away that weekend. Whereas in the past, I've probably let work overshadow that and taken stuff on board because I wanted that experience, or I wanted the money, or I was trying to be proactive. It kind of comes back to values, doesn't it? Like, what do I value? Do I value my health and my relationships? I kind of said this earlier, in terms of my finances, you know, I used to be really disorganised, but it also used to make me quite anxious that I was so disorganised with it, and I didn't know if people had paid me. So my friend, who I said is an accountant, has kind of been a bit of a godsend there and kicked my butt into action. And yeah, hobbies and mindful activity. So for me, like riding my horse, you know, if it's been a stressful day, going and riding my horse, I know that always brings me vitality. More recently, I've started yoga, and genuinely, I found that so helpful. When I used to exercise, it was all about almost kind of beasting myself, like I want to be stronger, faster. Whereas yoga's like it can still actually be sometimes hard work, but it's such a mindful activity. It's so nice to kind of have that time where I'm not pushing myself, I am just being. So I don't know if anyone's got any reflections on personal vitality, like whether anyone finds anything particularly useful in that area. It's kind of got maybe different things to what I've got down or relate to any of those.
I think I can relate to all of those. I'm a bit like you, I was published with money, didn't know how much money I had and what was going out or in, and I had to start. I've got a spreadsheet.
Yeah,
I'm not a spreadsheet person, I've got a spreadsheet now.
Good old Excel.
And yeah, definitely blocking out evenings and weekends.
Yeah.
I can tell you, I always seem to get away at the weekend now, but that's because when I first started working, I wouldn't do that. I'd let like work weekend, and now I've had to do that.
Yeah. I think particularly when you're self-employed, it's kind of your baby, and like you want it to grow, and sometimes you've got to come back to that. What about me?
I think when you're training as well or studying, like your work's never done. There's always more you can do, and unless you block out time, you don't take time off. There's always more that you can be doing.
Yeah.
Can I just ask, because obviously I struggle with most of these, but again we work with sport, so it's weekends and evenings, the normal working hours.
Yeah.
How often do you watch your clients? What are the competitions? Are on weekends? So how often do you go and see them competing?
Yeah. I think it really depends on the client. So the contract work I've got, I would be naturally going to competitions, things like I've been working in cricket for 2 years, that's coming to an end now, but I'd naturally be at matches. Like the shooting, for example, I'd go away. With private clients, it's something I reflect on a lot, because I do think to be effective, it is really useful to go and see the context that a client's in, and to understand more about the environment they're in, and also to kind of look at their behaviours in that environment, and what they're kind of saying to me and what I'm seeing matching up. But it would be unrealistic, I think, for me to see every single client training and competing, sometimes due to logistics, like if it's a Skype client, for example, or geographically, but also in terms of time. So I'd say yes, I do spend some evenings, weekends going to clients kind of training or matches, but certainly not all. But I do think it's a really effective way of working to be able to do that.
So is that like, do you put that in your contract, saying, okay, this is 6 hours of one-to-ones, but within that you don't have to have 2 or 3 observations?
That's interesting. No, I don't put it in the contract. I normally would put it out there when I initially speak with the client. I think it is on my new client form. It's definitely on. I've kind of got a bit of a template email that I tweak when I first, if a client's emailed me like interest in one-to-one sessions, I've kind of got a template of what I send back. And it'd definitely be in there that sometimes it's useful for me to come and watch you train or watch you compete, depending on the goals of our sessions and what we're working on. And I say that, this would be for the session rate plus my travel, essentially. So it's kind of clear that would be more, and it can be really useful. Yeah.
Right. Sometimes, working in sport, you are going to have to work the weekends, but then it's, if I'm working, so there's times like, right, if I'm working this weekend, I'm going to take like a Tuesday or a Wednesday off, or even if it's just like a morning, it's like, right, this morning I'm just going to let myself lie in or have a leisurely morning or something, which obviously doesn't make up for the full weekend, but you're then not ending up doing like 40 days. Right?
Yeah, well, I'm sure in relationships, because
Yeah.
you know, people hang out on the weekends
Yeah.
and evenings, so
Yeah.
why not do the Wednesday off? It's all around.
Yeah, it's not right. Yeah.
Like it's me and a coffee, that's it. So, you know, that's interesting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's kind of going, how can I grow many different relationships in that time? Yeah. Oh, I thought this was a really good question. I don't know if anyone's seen this. He brought it out early this year. It was like Richard Branson's, it was kind of this letter, almost to the public. And this isn't all of it, it's parts of it. I don't, is it useful for me to read that out? I'm just thinking because of the camera as well. Maybe so. So many people got caught up in doing what they think will make them happy, but in my opinion, this is where they fail. Happiness is not about doing, it's about being. Don't forget the to-do list, but remember the to-be list too. Kids are often asked what they want to be when they grow up. They're told, go to school, go to college, get a job, get married, have kids, then you'll be happy. But that's all about doing, not being. Stop and breathe. Be healthy. Be around friends and family. Be there for someone, and let someone be there for you. Be bold. Just be for a minute. If you allow yourself to be in the moment and appreciate the moment, happiness will follow. We've built a business empire, joined conversations about our planet, attended many memorable parties and met many unforgettable people. And while these things have brought me great joy, it's the moments I've stopped just to be, rather than do, which have given me great happiness. Why? Because allowing yourself to be puts things into perspective. Try it. Be still, be present. There's a reason we're human beings, not human doings. I really liked that. You can find that quite easily, like the whole thing online, but I just thought it like really linked into that kind of personal vitality. I don't do, like, do people like that?
I like to see how it changed from where he started his business. Was he like that, or was he more into doing? Because now he's in a position where, you know.
That's true. He said something in there like, people assume I'm happy because of what I've got, but he said it's because I've been happy that it's led me to what I've got. But yeah, I get your point, like it's maybe easier to say that as a reflection.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, I'm guessing, you know, it might have been different.
I just wonder when he started out on the Virgin and everything, what his life balance was like.
Yeah.
I'm just curious that it might not have been.
Yeah.
Maybe that.
Yeah. I suspect that is
Yeah.
very true. Yeah. But yeah, quite a nice one, I thought. Okay, number 3, professional stress. So Scott talked about here balancing self-care with practitioner competency needs. So kind of this idea, you know, in stage 2, like we're striving towards this competency that BPS are asking us for, and we've got our own maybe self-expectations of where we want to be, where we want to grow, develop, and are we kind of balancing that striving with self-care. Boundary generosity, so limits of giving of oneself with clients. So if we always go above and beyond, where does that leave us? In the balance with kind of doing enough, like being good rather than being excellent or perfect all of the time. Be present with suffering, so client grief, pain, difficulties, without being overwhelmed by it. So kind of that idea as empathetic practitioners, kind of being present, being with a client, but knowing how we manage that. High standards of work versus unreachable perfectionism. Intrinsic pleasure from work. At least one positive relationship with a supervisor or mentor. And enthusiasm to learn new ideas, theories and techniques. So, can't remember my reflections on this. Let's have a look. Okay, so imposter syndrome. I went to a workshop recently, and the room was full of psychologists and different therapists and practitioners, and we were kind of asked, did this exercise where we were asked to write on a label a like really negative thought that we had about ourselves, so kind of our inner critic, or you know, that kind of self-defeatist voice. And it was a really interesting exercise because we then had to put that sticker on ourselves. So you had people kind of saying like, I'm stupid, you know, I'm ugly, I can't practice, I'm terrible at my job. So the kind of thoughts that might come up on kind of a difficult day for you, or just a normal day for you. And then we walked around the room and like had this really curious interest in everyone else's labels. And